Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Schaefer. I'm the Associate Director for Graduate Student Success and Professional Development with the Graduate School and Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. So I'd like to welcome you to our first Career Pathways guest speaker session of the fall 2023 semester. I am thrilled to have this alumni with us today. One of the things that I love specifically about this session is oftentimes the alumni that come back to speak are people that I was able to have relationships with while they were students. And so, of course, I reach out to these people because they oftentimes were very active as students here at UTSA, very active with the graduate school, whether it be attending events or as our next speaker did many times for me, speak on panels for student success at orientation sessions, among many others. He also took very full advantage of our First Fridays and came to get donuts and coffee on a regular basis. So let me move forward and formally introduce our guest speaker. Hector Zurita was born in Mexico City and raised in a ranch Hector, I'm going to ask you to say it because I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly.
Tequisquiapan.
Thank you. At a young age, he discovered his passion for animals and biology by being exposed to many different kinds of animals, since his dad used to be an animal trainer for movies. Although biology was his passion, he was influenced by family in his teenage years to study medicine in Mexico, since academics in Mexico do not provide good economic stability. After graduating high school in Mexico, he had an opportunity to move to San Antonio, Texas, to study biology at the University of Texas at San Antonio. After rediscovering his passion for biology and discovering a new passion for psychology through an elective, he decided to major in both subjects. Following this path, he studied abroad in Kiel University in the United Kingdom for a semester, where he took some neuroscience electives and directed him to start doing neuroscience research at UTSA under Dr. Edwin Perea Rodriguez. After graduating with a bachelor's of science in biology and a bachelor of arts in psychology in 2015, Hector decided to volunteer in Dr. Alfonso Apicela's lab at UTSA for a year, where he then transitioned to start a PhD in neurobiology in 2016, studying long-range inhibitory neurons in the auditory cortex. After earning his PhD in the Apicela lab in December 2020, he started a postdoctoral fellowship position at NYU Langone Health under the mentorship of Dr. Bernardo Rudy, where he currently studies the mechanisms of associative learning in the primary somatosensory cortex. So it is, and just on a personal note, and one of the things Hector did not mention is he was recruited into the neuroscience PhD program at UTSA as a distinguished presidential research fellow. So he was fully funded with that fellowship for the majority of his time at UTSA. We met, I think, in his maybe first or second semester in that as a fellow and in his doctoral program, because we were working very closely with the doctoral research fellows in that cohort. So I got to know Hector very well. Thrilled to have him with us. So I'd like to formally introduce and turn it over to Dr. Hector Zurita.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the amazing introduction. It's a good summary of what I've been through throughout my life. That led to where I am now. So as John mentioned, right now I work as a postdoc fellow in Bernardo Rudy's lab. And it's an amazing place to work as a postdoc. If there are people over there who are pursuing a PhD in science and have the opportunity to maybe apply and get accepted to NYU Langone, I would highly recommend it. the sorry, the postdoctoral community in the university is amazing. There's a lot of resources, and people in the hospital, like PIs and everything, are crazy smart, crazy good advisors. And I surprisingly, I got into a very nice lab that gives me a lot of support, and I am very, very, very happy here. So if you can, NYU Langone is amazing. So let me start with the beginning. I was born and raised in Mexico, and as John mentioned, I lived in a ranch, and it was really nice, really quiet. It was mostly my parents and I in the house. My nearest neighbor was like a mile away, so it was a very, very nice childhood. There were no cell phones at the time. We didn't even have a phone until I was like 10 years old. So it was very, very quiet, really interesting. And it gave me the opportunity to have a lot of free time and go and explore in the ranch. And I was that kid that was walking on the grass and saw an insect, and grabbed the insect and looked at it and tried to investigate, and I really loved it. And very nicely, I didn't know at the time because I lived with it and it was normal for me, but because my dad used to be an animal trainer for movies, we got to have like tiger pups and falcons and eagles, and my dad trained them, and I got to experience that. So for me, animals were just my passion, and I now looking back, I can see that I had a childhood that not everyone gets to experience, and I was extremely, extremely fortunate. So as a kid and very young age, I would always tell my parents that I wanted to be a biologist, that I wanted to discover the next unknown species of insect or fish or whatever. And I had that idea throughout high school. My favorite professor in high school was Mr. Binis, who was my biology teacher, and he also helped me be very analytical in the subject, to ask a lot of questions, to think about biological systems in an integrated way, and to kind of realize that biology as a whole is a system, and we do not do research in cells or in, let's say, liver cells or brain cells or any type of animal in a very isolated way. They're interactions between animals, between cells, between tissue, system, organs, everything is connected. So as John mentioned, sometimes in Mexico it's really difficult to go into academics. And I remember that one time my dad, because I had told him that I wanted to study biology and everything, introduced me to a biologist in Mexico. And he had a PhD. I remember that he had done his thesis on a specific tick that lived in bats and it was like super focused on what the tick did to the bat and what the bat did to the tick, and it was super specialized. People that are going to do PhDs or in PhD programs will know that it's crazy how focused you are in the subject. So it was super nice to talk to this biologist, but he told me, right now, I have this position and everything, and I've been trying to build my house since I don't know when, and I hadn't had the money. Academics in Mexico are really difficult and everything. So in a way, I was a little bit discouraged on doing biology, but life is life, and it's amazing how if you're passionate about something, it kind of leads the way for you to, if you let it, to follow your dream. And because of that, and because of other conversations with family and friends of the family, I kind of decided to go to pursue a medical degree in Mexico, because it's very related to biology. You see systems, you kind of study cells and organs and everything, and you get to help people too. And I really like medicine and everything, but it wasn't my passion. So what happened is that I finished high school. I started looking into medical degrees in Mexico. And then around the 2009, 10, I graduated high school in 2009. At that time in Mexico, there was a bit of a dilemma, because the president at the time he was a really good president, but he wanted to fight the drug problem in Mexico. So he kind of made a mess, because he directly said that he didn't want the problem, and he started doing stuff about it, and Mexico started to become a little bit dangerous. So at the time, I had already done applications for medical school, and I had got in in the preparatory courses to go into med school in 2 universities, actually. So I was deciding to go to one or the other, when my dad told me that we had the opportunity, my brother and I, to go and study in the US, especially because it was getting a little bit dangerous and everything. So at the time, I didn't want to come to the US. I had never had the idea of coming to the US and study or live in the US. And I gave it a lot of thought. I also talked to a lot of friends and family, and they told me, if you go to the US, you will open a lot of doors, and if you do a good job in the US, then maybe you can go back to Mexico and continue doing stuff and everything, and you will be well prepared. So reluctantly, really, I decided to come to the US, and I ended up in San Antonio. And at the time, I wasn't in the best mindset, because in a way, I wanted to stay in Mexico, and I didn't look for many universities or anything. I was just thinking of going to college in San Antonio. So I applied to UTSA, and it was honestly a great great, unknowingly, a great decision. So, as you well know, if you've been in the US and maybe you studied biology or know people that study biology in the US, most people are doing biology because they want to do pre-med. So I started studying biology, one, because it was like killing two birds with one stone. I always wanted to study biology, so I was doing the thing that I wanted to do since the beginning. And then in the future, I would be taking the MCATs and everything, and then I would be applying for medical school, and um, and I would be a doctor, medical doctor. So I started doing my courses. I really loved the like the main biology courses. I didn't like other electives. It was always in my mind that I wanted to do biology, and so I really didn't like my elective courses, uh, especially politics and stuff like that. But it was really a blessing in disguise because I had to take a social science course as an elective. So I decided to do psychology. And I remember when I started that class, I got to think about the brain and in a more more philosophical and more mental state. How do we think? What do we do? Why do we do what we want to do? Why do we get this disorder, this other disorder? What's all of the like mental mechanisms of all of these mental disorders? And my professor at the time, I don't know if she's still at UTSA, Professor Acorn, did a great job, and I got fascinated with that course. I did really well, and it was really, really cool. So in a way, I decided to do a psychology major too. So I was doing psychology and biology, and that was probably after my first year or first year and a half of being at UTSA. And in my mind, I thought, if I do psychology, then I would have a better understanding of patients and people around me, as well as myself. And it's going to be extremely beneficial to a medical degree, which then I learned a few years later then that the MCAT then included psychology in the test, which is, I think, very smart. So then I started doing psychology. As I continued doing biology, and at the time, I hadn't done any neurobiology courses at UTSA. So I thought to myself, well, I have the psychology background, and then I have some of the biology background. A good intersection of both would be neurobiology. So I saw that UTSA had a few concentrations in biology. One was like microbiology, and other was like almost like environmental sciences. I might be wrong on that one. Like ecology or something like that. And then it was neurobiology. So then within my studies at in biology and psychology, I decided, why not take a concentration in neurobiology? So then I started doing neurobiology as a concentration, not as a major. And it really hit me. I wanted to do mostly science, not medicine. And I also discovered that as an international student, because I came to the US as an international student in a student visa, it was extremely difficult to enter medical school. So at the end, I decided not to pursue medicine and to pursue biology as a subject, and especially this intersection between psychology and biology, which was neurobiology. So then I went to the United Kingdom, to Kiel. If any of you have the opportunity to do a semester abroad, even as a graduate student, as a master or a PhD student, I highly recommend it, because it changed also my mindset about many things. It was a great experience. And there I took some neurobiology courses, neuroscience really. Neurobiology is a subject of neuroscience. Neuroscience is super multidisciplinary. So I took some classes there and I really loved them. So when I came back, I asked my professor in neurobiology, in my intro to neurobiology course, Edwin Barea Rodriguez, if he could give me a chance to kind of work in his lab. And there, he said yes. I started to do some experiments with C. elegans, which are these small nematodes that are used in research quite extensively, and including neurobiology, neuroscience. And these are like little worms. So I really started playing and realizing that I really loved it. I was going to the labs on weekends. Sometimes my friends, were going out and everything, and I had to do some experiments, like timing experiments in the lab. And for me, it was not really a problem to say no to my friends and for a weekend and go maybe in the middle of the night to put this chemical in the media of these nematodes and see what happened. And it was really nice to see that I could be there for extensive periods of time, and it wouldn't feel like a burden at all. So then I finished biology and psychology. I finished my student visa time. And as an international student, you have the opportunity to use what is called an OPT, optional practitioner training, which gives you the opportunity to, when you finish your studies, stay in the US and work in something related to your field. And depending on your subject, you have like 1 year or 1.5 years, or if you're in STEM, as I was, you could have up to 3 years. So I said, like, perfect. Maybe, I made a life in the US, in college. I made a lot of friends. I had a great time. I had great education at UTSA, met a lot of professors. So I said, okay, I'll try and find something, that related to my subject, that then I will transition to the next step. So I was still with Edwin doing some experiments, and I had the mentorship of another professor actually, and it was very funny because I went to talk to this professor and he told me, "Oh, you want to be continuing academia?" And I said, like, yes. And he said, well, as someone that has been in academia, I have to tell you some stuff. It is not easy. It's really nice. You can have your own schedules. You can have a lot of freedom. But the system sometimes is not perfect. And he gave me an example that got stuck in my mind. He said, like, for example, as a PhD student, sometimes you have to be very careful because you are under a PI, a principal investigator, which is your kind of a mentor, your professor, and he starts teaching you, and you're in that program for many years, so you learn to be even a little bit like your PI. And he told me sometimes the PI will not only think of you as a mentee, but maybe as possible future competition. So when you leave, then it would be, you have to be really mindful of your professional relationship with your PI, and also your relationship in general, because it might be tough. So just talking to my brain, I said, okay, fair enough. And then after that, I stayed a bit with Edwin, and then I decided to do something a little bit more challenging. To, instead of doing experiments in worms, to kind of do experiments in something that had a brain more similar to us. And then a friend of mine introduced me to another professor. That's where I transitioned to my OPT with Professor Apicella, Alfonso, and this guy introduced me to Alfonso, to Dr. Apicella, and he didn't have any students at the time, or just one student at the time. So he needed other people to kind of work in the lab, and he worked with mice. He was doing auditory stuff, looking at how different neurons connected in the auditory cortex, and how mice kind of use auditory cues to then transform that process or that sensory processing into an action, right? And how you hear, I don't know, a car coming super fast in the road, and then you stop so you don't get run over. So I thought it was super interesting, and I started doing this what I thought it was going to be more than a year, but this experience with him. So I started learning crazy cool techniques in the lab, how put an electrode in a brain slice and record from neurons and see how they fire, how they connected with each other, and all the diversity of different neurons in the brain, and how they make circuits and motifs, and how this affects behavior. And it was incredibly interesting. So I worked there. I had an amazing time. And then I told him, well, he actually asked me, what do you want to do after your OPT is done? And I told him, well, maybe I will do a science master's in science, and then go from there. But this is something that I really enjoy, and I would like to keep doing this. And he told me, do you like research? Would you like to continue going into research? And I told him, yeah, actually, that would be really, really nice, but you need a PhD, right? I need to do my master's. And at the time, I didn't know, but for science degrees, in PhD degrees, if you have enough experience in labs, and you have done a good job, and you like a lab, and the lab likes you, you can even skip a master's and go directly to a PhD if you have the qualifications. So he told me, why don't you just skip a master's and come and work in the lab with me as a PhD student? At the time, I was very ignorant on what was a PhD going to entail. But I knew that I loved science, and I wanted to continue doing research. And maybe it was nice that I was a bit ignorant, because I will tell you in a moment that I had some challenges through my PhD. But this professor, Alfonso, helped me a lot to get in the program, and I got there. I did my rotations in other labs that actually helped me out a lot as a postdoc fellow, because I'm implementing some of those techniques now. And then I returned with Alfonso to continue my PhD. At the time, I had done a lot of work, and I had done some experiments and everything, and I got to have first author paper actually in my first year as a PhD student, which was amazing. And I had another paper as a second author with Alfonso also, that I kind of worked in the year that I was working with him, but not as a PhD student. So for people that are going to go to grad school, I learned along the way some stuff that really stuck with me and helped me along the way. Because I'm going to tell you that it's a long process. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You have to wake up and either go to lab or go to classes, or go and talk to this professor, or go to a conference or anything related to your related subject, and continue until you have your requisites, and you publish, and you get your committee meetings, and they destroy you in the meetings in a good way, academic way, and you learn to figure out that experiments fail, you as an experimenter fail, and not everything is just results all the way, and everything is fine and everything. But you learn how to live with failure, And you have to really have in your mind that you are not failing as a person or as a student. It's part of the program. It's part of the training, and that you just have to be there and work hard and be focused and keep on going. One of the things that I learned that I would also recommend is that the program that you're in should not encompass 100% of your life. There's life outside your PhD or your master's, and it's actually very healthy to keep in touch with that part, with your family and friends, because one day, and I really hope this day you can avoid it, but as a graduate student, one day you will be in such a situation where you really don't know if you are doing the correct thing, if it was really your passion or not, and sometimes you might even feel trapped. And people outside the program, especially people that have known you your whole life, will tell you, hey, why don't you think about it a little bit more, and maybe, I mean, I know you since you were a kid, you were, trying to figure out why insects had 3 legs and arachnids had, 4 pairs of legs, 3 pairs of legs, or 4 pairs of legs, and centipedes and this and that, and mammals and whatever. And now you're doing neuroscience experiments, and you're figuring out how maybe this worm functions, or how the mouse hears a tone and then freezes because he got it associated with a shock or something like that. And you've always been interested in all that stuff, and it's maybe a tough time, but it doesn't mean that it's not your passion and you're not there. It's not your thing, and maybe you're thinking of quitting or not quitting or whatever, or you're in a very dark moment. But hey, just think about all the things that that you have experienced until this time in your life, and really figure out if it is good for you or not. And these people outside really reminded me of why I was there, and that it was really my passion, and to keep on going. And some other things that are relatable to this is that you really have to figure out who is going to be your mentor and why, and if you have a good relationship with your mentor. And also, which I found to be extremely important, there are some mentor relationships where you can be friends. You can be friends with your mentor. Some others that start that way and then end up another way, because a PhD program or a master program, if you do some work like dissertation work, and you have to be under a mentor and everything, can change with time. And you have to differentiate a friend from a mentor, and sometimes really keep your personal life away from your mentor, because they might do something that you wouldn't like for them to have done, even though you thought that they were your friend. So throughout my PhD, I got to work with my mentor and other mentors, which I also recommend for people that doing a graduate courses and everything. Do not only talk to your mentor, talk to other professors, even professors that are not in your field. They will give you a different take on things, both academic or personal things. And so what happened in my PhD? I started, it was great, I had a lot of fun, and then things started to be a little bit difficult inside of the lab for me. And with other people around me, including John, I got to go through it, and it was a curse and a blessing, because I was in that lab, and it was a difficult lab because I had to work a lot all the time, and sometimes I forgot the life outside of the lab and people that care about me and everything, but I had to finish, and I was extremely productive in the lab. My mentor pushed me a lot. I learned a lot from him. He helped me a lot too. I got to publish 6 papers, so that sometimes is very unheard of. And I'm really grateful with Alfonso, because he pushed me to do all that work. And I really finished with the help of my thesis committee and John. I kind of pushed a little bit my graduation because, as I told you before, mentors can see a little bit of a rivalry with their mentees that are, following their path afterwards. So I got some obstacles to jump, and with the graduate school and my other professors and mentors in my committee, I got to graduate. And then I was a doctor, and I had a very good resume and everything, and it was really, really nice, because I had opened a lot of doors to go many places. I actually got offers from Australia that I wanted to go to, but at the time COVID hit, and everything was closed, so they couldn't give me a visa to go to Australia. But at the end, I had always in my mind this other professor that I actually cited in my dissertation many times. I actually wanted to contact him before, and as an external member of my committee, my previous mentor Alfonso didn't let me. He told me that he didn't get along with him, not to say other words, and I had that idea that this other professor was not that great, but I really respected his science, and I cited him a lot. And someone very close to me in my PhD program, a very good friend of mine, asked me, if you could go and do a postdoc with anyone in the world because of their science, who would it be? And I told him, actually, Bernardo Rudi, but I don't know. I have doubts about him, and I don't know if I should go and work with him. And then him and another person in that lab told me, why don't you send him an email and tell him that you're interested in his lab, and just go from there. You don't lose anything, and you might be surprised. And because I really didn't want to get another mentor that I didn't get along with, for many reasons, I said, you know what, I'm going to contact people that have worked with Bernardo to see if he's a nice guy. So I contacted people that had already worked with him, and I found out that they all told me like amazing things about him. They told me, oh, if I had the perfect job, it would be with him. I had the perfect job, but because of this and that, I had to move, but I could go back without any problem. And then I spoke with other people and said, like, you know, there's people that had been in Bernardo's lab forever. They even go to other labs and they keep collaborating with him. And I said, wow, well, that's what science should be about, collaboration and, you know, being in an amazing atmosphere, and you know, working on your science, and had good mentorship, and so I said, great, I will contact him. I sent him an email. He's also from Mexico. So funny story, I graduated, I defended on the 16th of September of 2020, so almost 3 years ago. It's Mexican Independence Day. So I got independent from my previous mentor in a way. And I contacted him and I told him, he's also Mexican, like, hey, I graduated on the 16th of September. Great day for being independent and this and that. And he was super receptive. He was super nice. And then, you know, it was COVID time, so we got some Zoom meetings, and we got along super, super well. And at the end, he offered me a job, and I ended up coming to New York to work with him in the NYU Langone Health. And since then, I've been able to work in my science in the somatosensory cortex and how different inhibitory neurons connect with each other, and how is that mice get to associate, you know, their fingertips, they're like their whiskers, so they touch with their whiskers, and how they come to associate, you know, a sensory touch stimulation with a memory. And now I'm happily here working at NYU now and having a great life, also with I found love in New York, and it's just amazing. It was a great path that took me here, to do the things that I really wanted to do. I had some challenges, but with help, you can always, you know, go through, and perseverance has its reward. And with that, I'm probably going to finish.